Alright, silicone tutorial. So first of all, you want to get whatever silicone you can get here. So I use Permatex Ultra Grey. And that's pretty much it. So this comes with a separate lid and this little cone thingy. And you can cut off the tip to accommodate whatever size you want. It's important to cut off this tip with a rather specific size. I'll talk about that a little later. And here's the yo-yo. I removed the pads and cleaned up the seats so they look clean here. That's it. Alright, so first of all, what you need is a piece of tissue, paper, whatever you can wipe off the excess with. And something like this is a broken guitar pick that happens to be perfect for what I need to apply this. And the size or type of pick might differ based on where you're from or based on what you want. And I'll also talk about the curvature of the pick you use and why it's important. So, first of all, so I've already been using this, so you can see that it's like folded up to get the most out of it, and it's already pre-cut. And you see at the tip here, you can see that there is a little nub. I squeezed out a little extra after using it the last time, and that way it creates this kind of seal, so it slows down the process of this the portion inside this tube solidifying. And you don't want that to solidify, and you ideally would want to just take this tip off and be able to use it. And if you don't have this extruding bit here, it's gonna solidify the entire thing quickly. So you don't want that, so you want to make sure when you use it to squeeze out a little bit like this, so that you have a little bit of a cover. So let's start with this. So when you start applying, you want to take off the tip. You can just pull it out like that. As you can see, I can simply squeeze it out and it just comes out like that cleanly. Of course, if you haven't used this for months, then even with the lid, it's gonna solidify inside, so you'll have to unscrew the whole thing and clean out the insides using like a toothpick or something like that. But yeah, that's pretty much the preparation. And the squeezing method. So the tip I have cut here is a little wider than I want to. But if the tip is wider, it's easy to squeeze. So it's kind of a trade-off. But this is just enough for what I need. So by the method of squeezing, people will usually just squeeze it like this. But I found this to be very difficult long term, because I have to keep squeezing it in consistent increments throughout the application process to have the best results. So what I found to be the best squeezing method is to have your two fingers up here, the folded part, or if it's not folded, if it's new, you just have to kind of grip it like this. And then you apply force on these two fingers while just gripping the rest with this. So you're squeezing from the top towards the bottom. And I found this to be way easier on your knuckles and your wrists. So what you want to do here is, as you can see, the reason why I told you the size of this cut is important is that you want to make sure that when you have this tip here, you want this tip to kind of slot into the groove almost perfect. Like, it has to be slightly larger than the groove so that it stays on top, but it has to be small enough so that it doesn't slip to the next slot or to the side, but it rather slots in like as if you would put a ball in a groove. It slots in, right? And this is a little larger than I like, so it might slip to the side. but this is just good enough. So what you want to do is you want to put this in the groove, and you want to actually aim straight down. Um, so people, like, if you think about it, on paper, you might want, like, people would think that you want to angle it sideways, and what people usually say, tell you when applying RTV is to angle it away from the direction you're spinning it. So right here, as you can see, if I'm squeezing diagonally towards me, and if I'm spinning the yo-yo counterclockwise here, you're pretty much applying away from the direction the yo-yo is spinning, right? And on paper, it might seem ideal, as it would apply it without um, applying any unnecessary pressure. But what I've noticed is that if you don't apply any pressure while applying the silicone, is that this the layer that gets applied on top might not actually fill in all the pores on the bottom of the groove. And you don't want that, because it will end up in pore adhesion, and you might end up with pores where later on these pores will be exposed, and you'll have some holes on the finish here. So what I want to do is apply a decent bit of active pressure when applying the silicone. So that's why I want to actually aim straight down. And I'm going to start applying here. As you can see, I'm just applying force to these two fingers on top. And if I squeeze here, you can see it's actually, since I'm covering the top is pretty much level, and it's gonna start bulging out the sides. And as it's doing that, I want to spin the yo-yo, and you want to apply a consistent amount of force. And this is going to take a little bit of practice. It's not that hard. It's just going to take a couple tries to get it right. So as you're applying force, you want to spin the yo-yo, and if you see here, all you want to do is to make sure that the silicone being applied is level. So if you go too fast, as you can see, there are some areas that are lower, and if you're too slow, it's going to bulge out too much. So you want to go a little fast, and if it's low, you want to hang and in that specific position a little, so that the low parts are filled in. And you want to keep spinning like this, like that. And as you can see, it's messy, but it's totally fine, because you need that extra process to remove it anyways. So I want to show how it's done again on the other half. Aim straight down, start squeezing, and as soon as you see the silicone squeezing out the sides, you want to start spinning it. You want to make sure that the silicone is as flat as possible. You can see that when the seam, when you go all the way around, there ought to be some empty space between the starting point and the end point, and that's why you want to actually apply some extra. And it's gonna be messy, but it's gonna be worth it, because you're gonna be filling up all the pores inside. So you're gonna go a little further than one full rotation. That way you cover the entire area. So as you can see, both sides have silicone applied. Well, the first one's messier because I took some liberty explaining some extra concepts. So here now, this is the cleanup part, and this is why the pick is important. So as you can see, this pick, I mean, it's broken, but you can kind of figure out that it used to be this somewhat round triangular shape. And in this pick, you have basically two curvatures, right? So you have the corner ends, which is sharper, and you have the sides, which is a bit more rounded. And it depends on what kind and like how deep of a recess you want. So if you want a shallow recess, then you want to use this a little flatter part. If you want a deep recess, then you want to use a sharp part. And the reason why I like using this This broken one is that you have this part right here, which is completely flat. So if you want a flat, completely flush finish, you can, if you don't have this, you can use a credit card, for example. You can either use the corner of the credit card to apply the recess, or you can use the side of a credit card to make it flat. So if you want a flat surface, you can just put the credit card and turn it around and flatten that out. So in my case here, I like putting a deep recess because the silicone is way more responsive than regular response pads are. So I'm going to use this sharp end right here, and I'm going to apply a recess. So all you want to do is that you just want to slot this in the groove, and since it's as long as you keep this straight, the recess is going to be consistent. So you want to make sure this is perpendicular to the groove, so it slots right in like this. And now all I want to do is turn the yo-yo, and there's this slight tip right here. I use these two fingers to make sure the yo-yo stays in place while I spin it. If it like goes side by side, it's gonna be hard to keep the whole thing in line. So I want to use these two fingers to slot this in, and I want to press this down. It doesn't have to be hard, you just press it down just to make sure it's all the way down there. I'm going to start spinning the yo-yo like that. And it's totally fine, like it's natural that the silicone starts pouring out to the sides, and that's completely fine because what we're going to do is that after applying this recess, we're going to let this dry for a bit. And after it dries a little bit, we're gonna just scratch out the excess that came out the sides, and it's gonna scratch out very cleanly and very easily. So as you can see, after applying a bit of a recess, you have this excess. You just want to wipe it out on the tissue. And you can see here, it's not done yet because there's this little bit here that's sticking out. You want to keep spinning that until that's gone, and this can be tedious. And honestly, if you're lazy, you can slightly start angling this to just kind of flatten it out. And one thing I want to emphasize here is that the finish does not have to be perfect. Like it can even be bumpy and dirty. All you have to do is apply a recess, because after playing this for like a couple hours, it's going to completely flatten out and be very clean. So you don't have to make this completely like consistent throughout the circumference of the yo-yo. I'm just doing this because it's just a feel good thing. I just like having a completely clear surface when I start playing. But this is unnecessary. All you have to do is make one or two passes around the yo-yo and have a reasonably consistent finish, just like that. I don't know if my camera angle is correct here, but let me try and show you. That's reasonably clean. There's a little bumps here and there, but that's a relatively consistent recess. Now I'm gonna let this dry. Now I'm just gonna do the same process for the other half. Let's put this here. Put the yo-yo in between these two fingers so it stays in place. Now it's actually easier where the axle is, because let me show you. If you put this here, the pick presses against this axle, and if you spin it, it stays completely in place. Because on the other half, without the axle, you have to put a reasonable amount of force on these two fingers to keep that in place. But now you just have to press against the axle and just spin the yo-yo, and it's that easy. Now I'm just gonna clean up the rest by making just one or two more passes around the yo-yo. There's a little knob here. I'm just gonna clean it up, and boom. Now that's a reasonably consistent finish right there, and that looks good enough. And now all I have to do is let this dry out a little. As you can see, that there is a little bit of silicone bits that overflowed on the sides. Some might have overflowed towards the inside. Most of it will be on the outside. All you have to do is, from my experience, around 3 hours is more than enough to start scratching away the finish. Of course, 3 hours is not enough for the yo-yo to start being actually used, so be careful not to scratch the silicone that's actually in the groove. What I like doing is, if you have a credit card, for example, you just have to scratch it perfectly flat. Because if you scratch it flat, since there's a recess in the response, you're not gonna actually scratch the silicone itself, but rather you're just gonna end up scratching away the excess that overflow to the sides. And you just want to scratch maybe some extra that have flown inwards towards the inside of the walls. But that's easy to do once it has dried for around 3 hours or so. So that's pretty much it. All you need is some patience. From my experience, you can use the yo-yo around. Um, I'd recommend at least 12 hours, but from my experience, I didn't really have that much issue playing with the yo-yo after only 6 hours. But I haven't actually played it hard only after 6 hours. I've only used it like softly to tune and stuff. So I'd say wait at least 12 hours, 24 hours if you have the time and patience, but 12 hours is more than enough. And that's usually what I wait for. So that's it.